Welcome. We are in Senior AP English, and our objective now is to begin our actual study of Shakespeare's classic Hamlet. Let's make a few opening remarks and then get to the actual text itself. The play Hamlet is often considered Shakespeare's greatest play. In 1600, we believe, the play was presented on the stage of the Globe Theatre for the first time. It will become, by the 20th century, almost undebated, Shakespeare's greatest work. Some argue the single greatest work in the Western literary canon, and some even hyperbolically will argue it's the single greatest work in all of literature. I think that's an overstatement, maybe to some degree. Shakespeare himself would probably have said that's an overstatement, but be that as it may. Let's make a few observations about how to read a Shakespeare play, or how to study a Shakespeare play, we should maybe say, because obviously viewing it is obviously the ideal. Let's first of all recognize that Shakespeare liked to play in fives. So, for example, all of his plays are divided into 5 acts. Those acts are divided up into scenes. Of course, you know this from your study of R&J and as well JC in your earlier years of high school. So when we reference a Shakespeare play, we will talk about it first of all as the title of the play, then we will reference the number of the act, followed by the number of the scene, followed by the number of the lines. So if I say Hamlet 1, 2, 13 to 17, I'm talking about Hamlet Act 1, Scene 2, lines 13 to 17. All right, so this is the way, the nomenclature that we will use. All right. Let's now try to overview the plot structure of the play Hamlet, just so we know kind of where we are. This is a play about a young man. Now, we're going to call him young. By the end of the play, we're going to find out that he's actually 30 years old. But in Shakespeare's day, he is a young man because he is a prince. That is to say, he has not come into his economic fullness yet. He has not entered into the throne. To that degree, think of him as kind of like a Telemachus-like figure. Remember, Telemachus is whose son? Odysseus' son, right. Telemachus and Hamlet share in common that their father has not yet allowed them to ascend to the throne. We will begin the play, Hamlet, by recognizing that we are in Denmark. Shakespeare rarely sets his plays in England. He likes to set them outside of England. So, for example, when you pick up and study Macbeth, we're in Scotland, etc., etc. One of the reasons he liked to do that is so that he could make comments about the English people. He will do that in this play as well. In Denmark, we will discover there is political problems. The king of Denmark, his name is Hamlet. Now, this can get confusing. It's why I'm saying it in advance. The king of Denmark, Hamlet, has just recently died. Hamlet's brother, Claudius, has married Hamlet's wife, her name is Gertrude, and has taken over the throne. So we have a new king sitting on the throne of Denmark. His name is Claudius. Old man Hamlet dies, and his brother marries the queen and sits on the throne. This has apparently happened pretty quickly. Pretty quickly, all right? The reason why it's happened so quickly is what we will call the Fortinbras subplot. Fortinbras is a young kid in Norway, and he is planning an attack on Denmark. He's Norwegian. He's planning an attack on Denmark. Now, when you pick up Mel Gibson's version of Hamlet, and any number of other versions of Hamlet, you will oftentimes not have any mention of this Fortinbras subplot. Okay, you won't have any mention of it at all. And yet it is a significantly important subplot. Hamlet loves to tell stories within stories. Make a note of that. He loves narrative structure that has stories embedded within stories and sometimes paralleling each other. A 3A observation here. The most pristine example of this is King Lear. We will see that when we study King Lear. There's these plots within plots and they mirror each other. And it takes a little bit of time to kind of figure out exactly what's going on. At the beginning of the play, We will have out onto the stage, coming from two different directions, a couple of guards. They are in full regalia. They've got huge armor on, and swords and weapons and the like. And yet when they come out onto the stage, they are clearly afraid. Why they're afraid, we don't understand. Soon we will understand. The reason they're afraid is that a ghost has been walking the battlements of the castle in Denmark. The ghost of old King Hamlet, the dead king. Now, why is that a big dog deal? Well, because kings had privileges. One of the privileges was that they always were attended by some kind of religious, some kind of priest or whatever, so that at the moment of death, the priest could prescribe final unction, last rites, to the king to guarantee that the king would not end up in Dante's hell or in Dante's purgatory, that the king would end up in heaven. For Hamlet's ghost to be walking the battlements, this is evidence something went wrong in the death process for old man Hamlet. In other words, the priest didn't do his job right, or there wouldn't be a ghost walking around on the battlements. The understanding of Shakespeare's audience is that ghosts, you know this already if you know your Scrooge story, right? The Dickens Christmas Carol, remember? The old ghost of Marley will show up to meet Scrooge in the opening verse of that classic song. You're probably familiar with it from your childhood. The old ghost. Remember, Marley's been wandering the earth to speak with Scrooge about the problems that he has. This is fundamental to the Christian theology of Shakespeare's day. If you have not done well, you may not end up in heaven for a while. You may end up having to kind of do certain types of things before your soul is capable of being saved, especially if it hasn't gone directly to hell. This will be old man Hamlet. He's walking the battlements, and it is totally freaking out the guards. We will be met pretty quickly by a young man named Horatio. Horatio is a young scholar, student, but he's also a warrior. And he is the best friend of the dead king's son, also named Hamlet. So Hamlet and Horatio are pals. They are the best of friends. Horatio will show up because he's been called. He does not believe in ghosts because he's a student. He will say, "Tush, tush, 'twill not appear." In other words, yeah, right, what a joke, ghosts. And then the ghost shows up. Horatio's just a little bit freaked out. He tries to talk to the ghost will not speak to him, and he will leave. Horatio will then sit down, and we're going to get a little bit of history about what's going on and why it is that these soldiers are all in battle regalia. Namely, the young stud Fortinbras has, with the death of King Hamlet, decided he's going to come back and take back some lands from Denmark that Denmark took from Norway when old man Hamlet was alive. The ghost will reappear and then will leave quickly, leaving at the end of 1-1 the decision on the part of Horatio to go and tell young Hamlet that his daddy's ghost is walking the battlements. We will hear later in the first act of Hamlet, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. There's something wrong. Now, there are certain kinds of mantra that seem to come back again and again when we study Shakespeare. One of them is this famous notion, as goes the king, so goes the state. The idea is simple, and it's very Platonist in many ways. If you have a really good king, you have a really good and healthy state. If you have a crummy king, you're obviously going to struggle. Of course, the greatest instantiation of this is King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Remember King Arthur getting ill and having to have the cup of Holy Grail to save him, etc. All right? With that in mind now, we will turn to the opening lines of the play. And I want to point out to you the brilliance of Shakespeare. It's interesting to me to lecture Shakespeare. Over the years, students oftentimes will begin with the kind of ho-hum, here we go again. I've done R&J, I've done JC, really, I can read a plot summary and know what happens. And it will be somewhere by Act 3 that most of you will begin to pause, and I'll be able to tell by the look you're giving to me what a student once asked out loud, did this guy really know what he was doing when he put this play together, or did he just get lucky? Because there's going to be a moment when all of you will admit there's a reason why this cat's considered the greatest writer of all time. The opening lines of this play are a classic example. Once you finish this play, we'll come back and look at the first 20 lines of this play and realize the entire play is held in microcosm in the opening lines. For example, notice the very first lines of the play. Two guards come onto the stage, and the first one will speak and say what? Who's there? And right away, I'll point out to you, this is one of the major themes of this play. Who's there? What we will call later in philosophic instantiation, the existentialist question of identity. Who are you? Who are you? Who's there? In this play, we're going to have all kinds of masking, playing games. One person pretending to be someone else. We're going to have actors. We're going to have actors playing actors and so on. And again, we'll see it. Notice the second response is, nay, answer me. Stand and unfold yourself. In other words, I won't tell you who I am until you tell me who you are. There is some fear spoken in these lines. Obviously, the ghost is the reason for the fear. And yet this notion of unfolding yourself is a brilliant language game that Shakespeare will play right away. This is a play about unfolding yourself. That is to say, tell me who you are and who you represent and why you are. This unfold yourself line will come back for us time and again. Notice the next line, ironic, long live the king. I've already told you enough of the plot line to tell you that there's some irony in this line. What's ironic about this line? Yeah, the king is dead. We have a new king. Of course, the long live the king means Claudius, right? In other words, this is a way to identify loyalty to the king, and it will become one of the major themes of the play as well. The notion of loyalty. Who are you loyal to? Who do you really stand by and beside? This will become one of the central themes of the play as well. Notice that Francisco will ask if it's Bernardo, and Bernardo will respond, yeah, it is me, he. You come most carefully upon your hour. Dude, you scared me. It's kind of funny to watch big, strong bodyguards pretending like they're horrified of the darkness, right? They're really afraid as they speak these lines. Notice that Francisco says, or Bernardo says, "'Tis now struck 12. The reason Shakespeare needs to do this is because he would perform these plays during daylight. So he has to tell his audience, we are in the middle of the night. Shakespeare loves to begin his plays at nighttime. The beginning of Macbeth, of course, we're out in the Badlands. Guess what time? The witching hour it will be called, the middle of the night. The idea is that in the middle of the night, terrible things happen. Normally, in Shakespeare's day, by 1600, you were never out past midnight. You had a self-imposed curfew, and you were for sure home before midnight. Why? Because it was the witching hour, and bad things could happen after midnight. And so here, notice we're told what time of the night it is. And Bernardo will tell Francisco, get thee to bed, Francisco. In other words, this is the relief of the watch. To which notice that Francisco says, for this relief much thinks, 'tis bitter cold. We'll explain why they have the heavy coats on. And I am sick at heart. Which is an interesting line for a bodyguard to say, for a guard of the castle to say, I'm sick at heart. This will tell us right away, there is some intentional forecasting here. Things are wrong. Something is wrong. People are not doing well. People are not pleased. This, of course, will become more clear as we open up with Hamlet 1:1. Let's go ahead now. We will begin by listening to a professional performance of this play. All right, just follow along.
Who's there? Hey, unto me. Stand on the boat yourself.
Not with the king.
Another?
He
Oh, you come most carefully upon your armor.
is now struck 12 to make Francis.
That is for me, much thanks. It is bitter cold. I am sick at heart.
Have you had quiet guard?
Not a mouse stirring.
Well, good night. If you do meet Horatio and Marcellus, the rivals of my watch, bid them make haste.
I think I hear them.
Stand. Ho! Who's that?
Friends of this ground, please your good day.
Give you a good night.
Farewell on this solitary. I read you.
Bernardo has my case. Give him a night.
Bernardo. Say, what's Horatio then? Caprice of him. Welcome, Horatio. Welcome, good masters.
Why does this thing appear again tonight?
I have seen nothing.
Horatio says 'tis but our fantasy. And not let belief take hold of him, touching this dreaded sight twice seen of us. Therefore I have entreated him along with us to watch the minutes of this night. Till again this apparition come, he may approve our eyes and see to it.
Hush, 'twill not appear.
Sit down a while and let us once again assail your ears that are so fortified against our story, what we 2 nights have seen.
Well, sit we down. Let us hear Bernardo speak of this.
Last night of all, when yon same star that westward from the pole had made his course to illumine that part of heaven where now it burns, Marcellus and myself, the bell then beating one.
Peace! Break thee off. Look where it comes again.
In the same figure like the king that's dead.
Art a scholar. Speak to it, Horatio.
Looks it not like the king? Mark it, Horatio.
Most like. It harrows me with fear and wonder.
It would be spoke to.
Question it, Horatio.
Where art thou, that usurps this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of very Denmark did sometimes march? By heaven I charge thee, speak!
It is offended.
See, it stalks away.
Stay! Speak! Speak! I charge thee, speak!
It is gone. I will not answer.
How now, Horatio? You tremble and look pale. Is not this something more than fantasy? What think you on't?
Oh my God, I might not disbelieve without the sensible and true avouch of mine own eye.
Is it not like the king?
As thou art to thyself. Such was the very armour he had on when he them bishops Norway combated. So frowned he once, when in an angry power he smote the sledded Colax on the ice. It is strange.
Thus twice before, and jump of this dead hour, with Marshal Stork had he gone by our watch.
In what particular form to work, I know not. But in the gross and scope of my opinion, this bodes some strange eruption to our state.
Good now, sit down and tell me, he that knows, why this same strict and most observant watch so nightly toils the subject of the land, and why such daily cast of brazen cannon on foreign mark for implements of war? Why such impressive shipwrights whose sore task does not divide the Sunday from the week? What might be taught that this sweaty haste doth make the night joint labourer with the day? Who is that can inform me?
That can I. At least the whisper goes so. Our last king, whose image even but now appeared to us, was, as you know, by Fortinbras of Norway, that who pricked on by a most evident pride, dared...
If I can have your attention, please.
in which our
Staff and
valiant
students, this now
management
concludes
was
our
beside our
low
noble
security
and
lockdown.
big slave,
And resume
Fortinbras,
normal
who
classroom
by a
procedures. Thank you.
sealed compact, well ratified by law and heraldry, did forfeit with
I
his life
concur.
all
We are
those
done with our
lands
low
which he
security
stood seized
lockdown.
on
You
to the
may
conquest,
have students
against
resume
which
normal
unrighted company
activity.
was
Thanks
gauged
for your
by our
cooperation.
which had returned to the inheritance of Fortinbras had he been vanquisher, as by the same covenant and carriage of the article design his fell to habit. Now, sir, young Fortinbras, of unimproving metal, hot and full, hath in the skirts of Norway here and there sharked up a list of landless resolutes for food and diet to some enterprise that hath a stomach it, which is no other, as it doth well appear unto our state, but to recover of us by strong hand and terms compulsative those foresaid lands so by his father lost. And this, I take it, is the main motive of our preparation, the source of this our watch, and the chief head of this post-haste and Roman land.
I think it be no other but in so well may thought that this portentous figure comes Arvid through our watch so like the king that was, and is the question of these wars.
A mote it is to trouble the mind's eye. In the most high and palmy state of Rome, a little ere the mightiest Julius fell, the graves stood tenantless, and the sheeted dead did squeak and gibber in the Roman streets. As stars with trains of fire and dews of blood, disasters in the sun, and the moist star upon his influence Neptune's empire stands, was sick almost of doomsday with eclipse. And even though like precursor of fierce events, as harbingers proceeding still the fates and prologue to the omen coming on, how heaven and earth together demonstrated unto our climatures and countrymen.
sound. Behold, lo, it comes again. I'll cross it, though it blast me.
Stay, illusion! If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak to me. If there be any good thing to be done that may to thee do ease and grace to me, speak to me. If thou art privy to thy country's fate, which happily foreknowing may avoid, oh, speak. Or if thou hast abhorred in thy life extorted treasure in the womb of earth, for which they say you spirits are flocking there, speak of it. Stay and speak. Sorry, Marcellus.
I strike it with my party, sir.
You do understand? It is here. It is here.
It's gone. Did it wrong, being so majestical to offer it the show of violence? What is as the air invulnerable? Our vain blows malicious mockery.
About to speak when the cock crew, and it started, like a guilty thing on a fearful summons. I have heard the cock that is the trumpet of the morn doth with his lofty and shrill-sounding throat awake the god of day, and at his warning, whether in sea or fire, in earth or air, the extravagant and erring spirit hies to his confine, and of the truth herein this present object made probation.
Painted on the crowing of the cock. Some say that ever against the season comes wherein our Saviour's birth is celebrated. The bird of dawning singeth all night long. And then they say no spirit can walk abroad. Nights are wholesome, and then no planet strike, no fairy takes, nor witch hath power to charm. So hallowed and so gracious is the time.
So have I heard, and do in part believe it. But look, the morn in russet mantle clad walks over dew of yon high eastern hill. Break we our watch up, and by my advice, let us impart what we have seen tonight unto young Hamlet. For upon my life, this spirit dumb to us will speak to him. Do you consent we should acquaint him with it, as needful in our loves, fitting our duty?
Let's do it, I pray. I this morning know where we shall find him most convenient.
We'll just make a couple of follow-up observations about 1-1. Suggestion for the study of one of Shakespeare's plays. I always recommend that you are able to do what I call walk yourself through the play. That is to say, keep a little sheet of paper where you have each scene of each act, and you can write down just a couple of things you want to remember from that scene. And then we go back and we kind of review it. You will see that I play this game. So jot down real quickly a couple of things that you want to remember from 1-1 of Hamlet. Maybe for you it will be the opening lines of the play where the two guards are speaking in what is going to ultimately be language that is enigmatic or having double meanings. There's always a few lines that maybe you'll point out for yourself. For example, notice that roughly line 67 or so, Horatio will say about this ghost, this bodes some strange eruption to our state. Here the word state can mean both the individual mind as well as the collective group, the state, or what Plato would call the republic. In other words, something bad is about to happen communally, collectively in Denmark. Finally, there's the attempt to speak to the ghost. Notice, thou art a scholar, Horatio. Speak to it means you know Latin. Talk to the ghost. The ghost is saying nothing. Shakespeare would have a lot of fun with the prop that would be the Hamlet's ghost, usually putting certain kinds of white flour powder on the ghost of the character who would play old man Hamlet to make him look kind of freaky. Modern versions of Hamlet, one of the reasons you go to watch this on stage is to see how will they do the ghost, like how do they do it so that it looks, scary or whatever, appealing in some way. Finally, anybody can say it's morning. It takes a poet, and obviously Shakespeare is our greatest poet, it takes a poet to say, the morn in russet mantle clad walks o'er the dew of yon high eastward hill. In other words, the sun's coming up in the east. Notice the poetry of Shakespeare as well as we play that game. Let's now set up 1-2. 1-2 is for us going to be a very important scene because it will be the first time that we will meet some of our primary players. You have to imagine in your mind's eye what it is you're looking at as you watch the play unfold. onto the stage will come an entourage, a group of people. Clearly, you've got a king and queen here by virtue of their dress. You've got bodyguards, and a number of them. You have a bunch of rich people, aristocrats, that are also going to be there, and they all come onto the stage together. And the one who will begin to speak is the king, now of Denmark, Claudius, Hamlet's brother, the old man Hamlet's brother. He will say a number of interesting things about his position as king. Notice, though yet of Hamlet, our dear brother's death, the memory be green. In other words, what? Put it in your own words. Hamlet just died. The old man, green, just died. And that it us befitted to bear our hearts in grief and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe. Is Denmark happy or sad with the passing of King Hamlet? They're obviously sad. It says a lot that the kingdom and the people of Denmark loved the old man Hamlet. Yet so far hath discretion fought with nature, that we with wisest sorrow think on him, together with remembrance of ourselves. Therefore, our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, have we, as 'twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and a drooping eye, with mirth in funeral and with dirge in marriage, in equal scale, weighing delight and dole, taken to wife. Let's point out right away the ostentatious language that Hamlet will speak in. He's a king, and so it's going to take him 9-10 lines to be able to say, while I'm sad about the passing of my bro, I've decided to marry his wife and take over the throne. Which is what he says has to have happened. Notice he also says, nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms. He's talking to the other people. In other words, you all agreed this is what I have to do for all our thanks. And so the first thing that old man Hamlet or old man Claudius will do is to say, I had to become king. The reason he has to become king will be explained next. We will have a mission that will be sent to Norway to try to figure out why this young Fortinbras kid is going to try and take back lands that Hamlet, the old king now dead, had taken from Norway. Then we're going to have the speaking of a young man named Laertes. Laertes, what is it you want? And the young man will say, I want to go back to college, university in Paris. Can I go? And Hamlet will say, well, what's your father say? And it will be the first time that we meet another really important character in the play, the old fart, Laertes' dad, Polonius.
I think you're confusing everyone because you keep saying Hamlet.
You're supposed to be saying Claudius.
I'm sorry, Claudius, the old man Claudius, please forgive. So the old man Claudius, who's now king, will be asked by Laertes, can I go back to Paris to go back to school? And he will ask him, well, what does your father, old man Polonius, have to say? And Polonius will say, yeah, I really don't want him to go back because I like my boy, but go ahead and let him go. So at the beginning of 1-2, the important thing to say here is that King Claudius comes onto the stage, really important for your notes, looking every bit like the king. He looks like a king, he sounds like a king, he acts like a king. And that's very important because if you're watching this play for the first time, you do not know that old man Claudius is a really bad guy. He is the villain of our play, and he's done some really terrible things to get the throne. But we don't know that at the beginning of the play, and we're not supposed to. We're going to see a king who is good at legislating. He comes onto the stage and he does his thing. Here, we will think about what makes a great leader when we think about Plato. Claudius fits the bill in every way, iconically, the way he looks. We're only going to discover later that it will in fact be a ruse. It's not real. It is a word we'll use again and again in 1-2, it is seeming. He will seem to be a great king, but not so great a king at all. Finally, Claudius is going to turn and speak for the first time to young man Hamlet. Now, let's just say this out loud. If at some point in your life you meet anybody who says, I acted the role of Hamlet in the play Hamlet, understand, we're not talking about the dead king Hamlet. We're talking about the young man who we're about to meet for the first time. The minute you hear anybody introduces himself as saying, I played the role of Hamlet, you can go ahead right away and just begin to genuflect. Because this is one of the most difficult roles to play in all of drama. Not least of which, the number of lines you have to memorize to be able to play this role. Because Hamlet gets most of the lines of this play. We're going to meet him for the first time in 1-2, and the way we meet him is intentionally designed to create a little confusion for the audience. Okay? The very first time we meet Hamlet, we're going to ask tomorrow, how does Shakespeare kind of set that up? Because here's the important thing, in a lot of performances of this play, you don't see Hamlet on stage as the other things have been happening at the beginning of 1-2. Okay? I'll kind of set up how that's done often in performances of this play tomorrow when we return, and we'll come back to then talk about Hamlet 1-2. Thank you.